who came to revile and plot against one another as the sick and the starving were dropping dead around them. The survival of the small English outpost was thanks mostly to two extraordinary people, one a commoner and one a royal. The commoner was Captain John Smith, a former soldier with an impatient nature and a total lack of respect for his social betters, or anyone else who hadn't proven himself through his merits. The royal was Pocahontas, the beautiful, headstrong daughter of the most powerful chief in Virginia. The names of John Smith and Pocahontas have by now passed into American legend. Like the Jamestown story as a whole, their stories have been told over the generations with varying degrees of accuracy. The imaginative 1995 Walt Disney Company movie, for example, endowed Pocahontas with a Barbie doll figure, dressed her in a deerskin from Victoria's Secret, and made her Smith's love interest. Trouble is, Smith and Pocahontas were never romantically involved. That isn't surprising. When Smith was in Virginia, Pocahontas was a girl of 11 or so. The real Pocahontas was a child of privilege in her society, that is, the Powhatan Empire, who was curious about the English newcomers, befriended Smith, and gave him and the rest of the English crucial assistance. Years later, looking back on her contributions, Smith would recall that her compassionate, pitiful, pitying heart gave me much cause to respect her. He credited her with saving the colony. The English in Virginia, for their part, chose a strange way to repay her. After Smith left the colony, they kidnapped her and held her hostage for ransom from her father, Chief Powhatan. Yet during that time, she came to embrace English ways, married a thoroughly love-struck Englishman named John Rolfe, and lived out the rest of her short life in his country. Smith, at the other end of the social scale, was born in 1580 in rustic Willoughby by Alford, Lincolnshire, to a simple farm family, putting him just one rung above peasanthood. Soldiering was to be his ticket out. He was of slightly below average height, even by the standards of his time, measuring in at perhaps 5'3" or 5'4", but he was stocky and tough. He had dark hair and a full beard, and eyes that showed intelligence and confidence. In a portrait made later in his life, Smith meets the onlooker's gaze with neither haughtiness nor servility, but instead with unassuming equality, an unusual attitude in his class-conscious homeland. He was honest, sensible, and well-informed. Thomas Jefferson wrote of him a century and a half later. The young John Smith attended grammar school in nearby Louth, while dreaming of overseas adventure. At the age of 13, no longer content with fantasizing, he tried to run away from home in hopes of making his way abroad. His father, George Smith, had other ideas and succeeded in stopping him. At 15, bowing unhappily to his father's wishes, John Smith became an apprentice to a merchant. A year or two later, however, in a bittersweet turn of events for the young man, the path to the sea became open. Smith's father died. This time there was no one to stand in John Smith's way. Bored with counting his master's money, Smith headed to the continent and fought under a Captain Joseph Duxbury in the Netherlands, aiding that country in its war of independence against Spain. Life on the battlefield agreed with him. Returning to England a few years later, he had a plan ready. He withdrew to a little woody pasture, as he called it, to make a single-minded study of all things martial. He was 20 years old. In that pasture, Smith showed the first signs of what would become his lifelong preoccupation with practical knowledge. He practiced horsemanship. He read Machiavelli's The Art of War. He learned the life story of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, and patriarch of the 2000 film Gladiator. Smith became an explosives expert with the aid of a translated copy of Vannoccio Berenguccio's Pyrotechnia. He memorized codes for sending signals over distances using torchlight. Although some of his study seems more on the side of erudition than practicality, Smith would have seen no bright line between the two. History